Your brain controls everything you do and everything you are. So knowing about it and then learning to love, respect, and nurture it, it's absolutely essential. It's one of the big missing pieces in the discussion on health and success.
Our special guest is the incredible Dr. Daniel Amen, and he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he's written over 40 books. And the Washington Post has named Dr. Daniel Amen America's most popular psychiatrist, and largely because of his wildly popular clinics that have over 7,000 patient visits per month and has the world's largest database of functional brain scans relating to behavior, totaling over 75,000 scans on patients from 155 countries. And as mentioned, he's authored or co-authored 70 professional articles and more than 40 books, including the New York Times bestselling book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And he's appeared on numerous television shows, including Dr. Phil, Larry King, Dr. Oz, The Doctors, and The View. And now he's back here on the Model Health Show to talk about his incredible new book that is incredibly timely for right now to add more value to your life. Let's jump into this conversation with the one and only Dr. Daniel Amen. What number is this?
Oh, I think it's 43 or 44.
Did you hear this? Unbelievable.
This means I'm old and I'm consistent.
I respect that. I respect that. That's just so exceptional. You're like in the absolute percent, like 0.0000001% of the population that's ever done anything remotely close to that. Do you realize 43? I've written 2 books and they almost killed me. Like, this is incredible. Dr. Amen, your new book is just blowing my mind. We talked before and you told me that you were writing the book, and I mentioned how important and timely I thought that the subject matter was. And the title of the book is Your Brain is Always Listening, Tame the Hidden Dragons that Control Your Happiness, Habits, and Hang-Ups. First and foremost, can you explain what you mean when you say your brain is always listening?
Your brain is always listening to so many different influences day to day, from the scheming dragons, things like the news and societal input. It's listening to your bad habits every day. It's listening to something I call the they, them, and other dragons, other people, past and present. And it's listening to something I call the dragons from the past that are still breathing fire on your emotional brain. And in the book, I talk about 13 dragons. People can actually learn about their dragons at knowyourdragons.com. We have a very cool quiz. And my primary dragon is the abandoned, invisible, or insignificant dragon, because I grew up with a family of 7 children. I have 5 sisters, an older brother, which in a Lebanese family automatically means you're not special. That the oldest boy is the golden child, and in so many societies, but particularly in Middle Eastern culture, which is what I grew up in. And I just always felt invisible and insignificant. And there are good things to this dragon. So in the book, I talk about the origin story of each of the dragons, what triggers them to breathe fire on your emotional brain and cause you pain, how they cause you to react, and how to tame them. And there's also a section on the upside. So the upside of the abandoned, invisible, and insignificant dragon is I've been seeking significance my whole life. And it sort of worked out for me. You know, we have 9 Amen clinics around the country, and it just makes me happy, because what it does is it tames that dragon that I've been listening to my whole life. Um, and so that's the idea behind your brain is always listening.
So good. And what I found as I was going through, of course, I find character traits that I see in myself and then also that I see in my kids, that I see in other family members. It was just as if you were literally scripting out and detailing our personalities and our tendencies and our triggers. And this is why I love your writing too, is that it's so like right to the point and very practical and kind of pragmatic. And, you know, for me, I think that I didn't think about it in depth before about birth order and how that can play out for so many people, you know, because even like we're watching Vikings or Game of Thrones or something, the firstborn son, he gets to be king. If you're third born or second born son, you're the vice president, you're the vice king. You know, you're automatically like second tier. And so just even growing up with that kind of chip on your shoulder, and thought about my little brother. And I'm just like, why are you like this? You know, and he's really been driven to find that significance. And the thing is, and like you just said, this is what I freaking love about your work is that you can find an upside in it because that's driven him to really make it through very tough circumstances and to make a name for himself and to be significant. He just started coaching football this year and took his kids, their little peewee football team, to the Super Bowl of their state.
Wow.
You know, and it's just so wonderful, you know, but it's that driving force that he's turned into something positive that used to hold him back.
Birth order is so important. And there's a lot of research behind it. And being a middle child, um, I'm a peacemaker. And I like that, right? So it's important to find the upside of the dragons so they don't hurt you. And uh, and the oldest, the golden children, um, often it causes them to struggle because they may not have to work as hard as those of us. We think of Avis and try harder. but
Right.
but you know that success often doesn't come from being special. Success comes from your ability to work hard over a prolonged period of time. Now, you have to get over some of the self-esteem issues associated with not feeling special, and that leads into the inferior flawed dragon, which is driving the epidemic of teenage suicide. Uh, and when you compare yourself to others in a negative way, it can often drive sadness and drive hopelessness.
This one right here, I'm not saying that anyone is more pertinent right now, but it really jumped out at me. And you said specifically, and I'm quoting you directly from the book, you said that due to social media, these dragons are causing an epidemic rise of anxiety, depression, and suicide in young people, the inferior and flawed dragons. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Whenever you compare yourself to someone else in a negative way, it makes you sad. It makes you anxious. And given that social media is just in your face over and over, we see, especially young girls. And before social media, young girls hated how they looked. 93% of young girls were unhappy with how they look. And now it's constant in their face, which just drives the negative thoughts. I call them ants. It drives the ants to really shove their self-esteem in the dirt, and they get hopeless because of that. My wife was doing Christmas shopping, and you've met my wife, and we've had you on our podcast. And Tana's beautiful. She's beautiful. She's smart. But while she was Christmas shopping, one of her friends about her age popped up, and she's like, "Wow, she looks so good." And within 5 minutes, Tana's like thinking about, oh, I should get my eyes done. What's the next thing? I and it just was like trashing her self-esteem.
Mm.
Imagine having that happen over and over and over again. And I teach my patients something called the 18-40-60 rule, which says when you're 18, you worry about what everybody's thinking of you. And when you're 40, you don't give a damn what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize nobody's been thinking about you at all. People spend their days worrying and thinking about themselves, not you.
Right.
So you might be comparing yourself to them, but they're probably not comparing themselves to you. It's such a trap because there's always going to be someone, always taller, richer, smarter, stronger. And there are always going to be people who are not those things. When you want to just ask yourself, am I as good as I can be? And stop comparing. And in the book, there's actually some techniques on how to stop. But the first thing to do is notice when you do it and then distract yourself to look for what's right rather than what's wrong.
So I just thought about when you said that that principle. When once you get to that point where you realize nobody's thinking about you, I thought about my friend Jim Quick, which I believe you guys know each other as well. He says that people are tuned into a radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me, right? We're all thinking about ourselves, thinking through our own lens, and we often get caught up in what everybody else is thinking. And so often, like that dichotomy, that contrast is like driving us. And my mother-in-law calls it borrowed desires, right? We're borrowing everybody else's perception about what we think we should be, what we think we should be doing, what we think we should look like. And it can create a lot of disruption for sure with our psyche. And so I want to ask you a little bit more about this one because, so number one, you just mentioned basically, and this is so powerful, is just becoming aware of it, becoming aware of when you're doing it, when you start comparing yourself. And also you mentioned about recognizing your triggers, right? So for your wife, a trigger was that on social media? Yep.
And it was seeing someone else about her age. And whenever you see somebody on social media, generally they have makeup on, they pick the pictures they want. They're not how they are in everyday life, but you're comparing yourself to you in everyday life, like when you first got up in the morning, and you're like, well, I don't look like that. And when you do that, it just drives your self-esteem lower. And I've been blessed to see some of the world's greatest athletes, and like I got to scan Muhammad Ali, and greatest movie stars and pop stars, and you just cannot believe the negative thoughts they have, like I'm not enough. And you're like, you're not enough. No one will ever be enough. So, am I
Right.
enough for me? And one of
Right.
the strategies I have them do is between now and the next time I see you, I want you to write down the top 20 accomplishments that you've done in your life. Because we focus on what we didn't do
Right.
rather than focus on what we did do. And
Yeah.
where you bring your attention always determines how you feel. So, where you focus determines how you feel. So, if you focus on what's wrong, you're going to feel wrong. And if you focus on what's right, you're going to feel so much better.
Right. Continuously, where we're putting our attention. I love that so much because this is something very practical again that we can do when we notice that we're doing this thing, and also just putting it in our tool belt to focus on our own strengths, our own accomplishments that we often, because it's us, we belittle those things. They're not as important. But some of these things we've all accomplished are just freaking remarkable. It's amazing that I even stepped foot on a college campus because I didn't know anybody in my sphere of influence, any of my peers who ever went to college. It was just something I never saw. So even if I just put that in my accomplishments bucket, when I'm starting to feel inferior, for example, if that was one of my dragons, I can have that there to remind me, like, you've actually done a lot of cool stuff as well.
I mean, it's just how exciting is that? Like, I'm the first one in my family to graduate from college. I'm the first advanced degree person in my family. And when you start to get to a level and it's like, well, I've not sold 10 million books, right? I mean, I can look at what I haven't done and feel bad or feel inferior, or I can look at what I have done and feel good. Now, it's always a balance, right? You want to stretch yourself to be your best, but ultimately the death dragon wins, which we might talk about. And if you don't tame that guy, you're going to always feel inferior.
All right. Now, this one, I'm sticking here because, again, this is something that all of us are really inundated with today, which is this comparison. I'm sticking with this, and I got to ask you about this. You say something that seems kind of counterintuitive as one of the tools for taming this dragon, which is to praise others. Why did you put that in there as a tool?
Well, because then you're getting outside of yourself and you're not so focused on you. Because when you're self critical, you tend to let that leak to other people in your life. And it's a habit. Do I notice what I like more than what I don't like? And there's a whole section in the book on bad habit dragons. And one of the bad habit dragons is let's have a problem. It's where you're sort of always poking at other people. And often it's because the inferior flawed dragon is running your life. So you can't notice what you like about you. Well, you're not going to notice what you like about other people either.
Yeah, so good, so good. So I say this that what you appreciate appreciates, right? So when you see something that might have you feeling peanut butter and jealous on social media, but to praise that thing and to appreciate that in somebody else. And it just kind of encourages, it's kind of like letting your mind know, like, hey, I like that. I'll have more of that myself if I can make an order off the menu of the universe. But this kind of actually ties in for me. As we're talking, it just really hit me that feeling invisible can easily lean into feeling flawed and inferior. These things can be a little bit connected. But specifically, when you talked about taming the dragon of abandonment, invisibility, and being insignificant, and I think this can help here as well. And I just want to talk about this. I did not want to miss this. You talked about one of the strategies for taming that first dragon is to know your life's purpose. And I thought that was like, it seems like this very gargantuan thing to know that, but you made it very practical.
Yeah, no, I'm working with this 18-year-old girl I just adore, and no one's ever asked her to get very clear on her goals and her life's purpose. And, it's something that we should actually do in school. Like, why are you here? And what do you want in a balanced way? Of an exercise called the one-page miracle on one piece of paper. Write down what you want: relationships, work, or school for kids, money, physical, emotional, spiritual, health. And then every day you ask yourself, is my behavior getting me what I want? That is the definition in my mind of mental health, that you're able to act in ways consistent with what you want. But if you never define it, how do you know? And purpose you can actually find quickly by the exercise in the book. And it's basically, what do you love to do? What are you so good at you could teach other people? And what do people want or need from you in your circle? And how do they change as a result of what you do? I mean, for me, I change people's brains, I change their lives. And so as a result of what I do, my purpose is to create a revolution in brain health. And so every day I just go, okay, what am I doing to live out the purpose I have? And purposeful people not only live longer, they're cognitively sharper because they are engaging their brain. And if you don't know your life's purpose, I mean, there's a section to work on it. I mean, it's always a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
And another thing for the inferior flawed, and I find myself doing this. That I mean, I get to hang out with some really cool people. I just finished, I think it's my sixth um, session on Dr. Phil. And when I was younger, I might go, well, why am I not like him? And, have a television show and all of that. And that's the inferior flawed dragon sort of breathing on me. But as I tame it, I'm like, well, how cool is that? I get to do this. And I'm grateful for the opportunities rather than I'm comparing myself to other people. And I found out this as a young psychiatrist. As soon as I thought you were cool and I wanted to get to know you, within 3 weeks you'd be in my office telling me about the garbage in your life. Uh, that if you think someone's normal and better than you probably don't know them well.
Yeah. And I got to say, I'm so grateful that you are not on TV doing a show consistently because we get to have you more often. And also, you've written 43 books. It doesn't even make sense in my mind. And, just having that capacity for, like on the ground healing, so much that you've done and, the impact. And you've also had this incredible trickle down effect with the people that you've served and helped and them sharing things with their communities and them sharing things with their family. Like your reach it's got to be like 1 billion people by now. It's just, it's incredible.
Well, see, it just depends on where you look. And,
Yeah.
it's true for me, it's true for almost everybody I know. If you look to what's wrong, you're going to feel bad. And if you look for what's right, and it's training, you have to train your brain. When we talk about the hopeless and helpless dragon, there to train that dragon, and this is the dragon that drives depression, is something I call positivity bias training. It's you need to start pushing your brain to look for what's right during what's wrong. And in the middle of a global pandemic, it's like, well, how can you do that? Start every day with today is going to be a great day. Start every day. Start every day with that. It's actually on the top of my to-do list in case I forget. And when I go to bed at night, I always go, what went well today? And it's like a treasure hunt for me every day, just looking for those little micro moments on what went well today. And that way I can train the hopeless and helpless dragon out of that negative state.
So good. So good. One other piece, and I really want to talk about this because it is very interesting. I'll put it like that. The situation that we're in right now in regards to this. So whether it's feeling abandoned and invisible or, and of course, insignificant as well, or anything related to feeling like we're not enough and that we're flawed, being a part of a group, a positive, affirmative group can be incredibly healing for so many different things. And that was one of the strategies that you talked about for taming that first dragon. But you also, and I remember in our last conversation, you mentioned the term that's been put into culture, social distancing. And you felt that that term was not ideal for what we wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a bad term. It should have been physical distancing. So the virus doesn't hop, from you to another person. Social distancing is the prescription for loneliness and disaster. Loneliness is actually a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and depression. And we need to be socially more connected than ever before. So we get to do this, right?
Yeah.
We get to hang out, even though we're not sitting next to each other. It's just as intimate, just as thoughtful. And this is where technology can really help us. I mean, obviously, we have to be careful with it. It doesn't hijack a whole generation of children. But at the same time, being connected through voicemail and text and FaceTime is so important.
Yeah, I love that. You said in the book, quote, the accurate use of language matters. And when I saw that, it just really hit me and how the language we use with ourselves, of course, and these dragons, that language, and also our language that we use with other people, which we're going to come back and talk a little bit about later. But the other people's dragons, that language affecting us too. And I shared a study the other day because I saw a news clip, once this variant of the virus hit and they had cases here in LA and they had a news segment. And I rarely ever watch the news, but I turned the TV on and within a minute it was getting played. And this is getting broadcast, of course, to millions of people here in LA. And the physician, even though the thing is, he's really trying to tell people to exercise extreme caution. But he literally said, and I'm quoting, if you go outside, you are subjecting yourself to putting yourself in front of a firing squad. Yes. And so when with that language, what firing squad, what is connected to psychologically for us is imminent death and also is associated with you doing a crime. And he said, and I recorded and I put it on to teach a lesson, on social media and also tied it to a study. And this was a peer-reviewed study published in Frontiers in Pharmacology, reiterated how negative suggestion by authority figures and physicians can have significant neurobiological effects and incite symptoms of physical and mental illness. So just being aware of our language, express in a different way to exercise caution, but don't tell people that you are in imminent death. You're gonna definitely die if you go outside your door. We just got to be a little bit more careful in language we use. So when you said that in the book, I was like, absolutely. Let's be more intentional in the words that we use so we can get to the place we want to go without creating more problems, if that makes sense.
Well, it reminds me of the shouldn't shaming dragon. And a lot of that has been put out in the media during the pandemic. And it's causing a negative reaction, a backlash when you shame people or make them irrationally afraid. Now, we should be afraid of the virus. There's the anxious dragon. And I always say, my goal is not to completely eradicate your anxiety. Low levels of anxiety kill people, right? The don't worry, be happy people actually die the earliest from accidents and preventable illnesses. So you need a healthy dose of anxiety. I mean, too much will ruin your life. It'll ruin your marriage. It'll ruin your job, your sense of happiness and joy. Um, but yeah, that's pretty crazy. I always tell my community your best defense against COVID is your immune system and your brain, because ultimately it's about decision making, right? Low levels of anxiety, you're not wearing a mask, you can infect a whole bunch of people, you can become a super spreader. But too much anxiety will keep you locked in and put your immune system at great vulnerability to be hurt by this virus.
Yeah. So in talking about the anxious dragon, because this is another big one that has definitely skyrocketed. One of your patients, Miley Cyrus, reached out to you. It just seems like she got hit with a massive wave of anxiety. And can you talk about some of the triggers there, and some of the reactions? Like, how does this affect us when this dragon starts to breathe fire on us?
Well, I actually remember the night she called me. So I've known Miley for 10 years and adore her. And she was freaked out because of the pandemic. I mean, as a country, we were freaked out as a world. And it's like, how long does the virus live on packages? And I can't go out. And is my grandmother going to die? And as I walked her back from the ledge, as we tamed that dragon, she invited me to be on Instagram with her the next day. And we did that for her millions of fans. And you have to be very careful with what you allow yourself to think. I always want you supervising the thoughts going through your head. Just because you have a thought has nothing to do with whether or not it's true. That thoughts lie, they lie a lot, and it's often our uninvestigated thoughts that drive anxiety, panic, and fear. And so managing our thoughts is critical. I have a new technique. It's actually not in this book. It's going to be in my next one, called You Happier, because it's what everybody wants. All my patients, they come to me because they want to be happier. But a bonus technique is give your mind a name, just so you can separate from your mind a little bit. Like I gave my mind the name Hermie. Hermie was my pet raccoon when I was 16. And she talked all the time. I have no idea what she said. And when I just don't have to listen to my mind, when I separate from it, I feel so much happier. I have this NHL player I treat, and he struggles, even though he's a Stanley Cup champion, struggles with anxiety. And as we were talking about give your mind a name, and he couldn't think of one. And I'm like, do you have a nemesis? He's like, yeah, several. And so he ended up giving his mind the name Johnny based on, this guy who was hyper competitive with, because he knew if Johnny got on the ice, Johnny wouldn't win. Right. I mean, that's, the competitiveness of high performing athletes. And it's like, you just don't have to believe everything you think. And please don't say everything you think. That's why God gave you frontal lobes to suppress. It's just evaluating, does this thought help me or does this thought hurt me?
So good. So good. And in this section, you give, of course, every section you're giving very tangible tools for taming these dragons. So with the anxiety dragon, you shared that prayer and meditation can calm the amygdala. So it's where we experience a lot of the side effects of this dragon. And you said that in a 2009 study in the International Journal of Psychiatry and Medicine found that prayer may be useful in the treatment of anxiety and depression. And then you actually performed studies yourself because you're somebody who's looking at the brain on how meditation can influence the health of our brains.
So we did a study. We actually did 3 of them on a Kundalini yoga form of meditation called Kirtan Kriya. It's a chanting meditation, or really it's a singing meditation, and it's all of 12 minutes. So I treat a lot of people who have ADD and they have short attention spans. So I'm like, 12 minutes, give me 12 minutes. You don't have to go to an ashram in India and sit on the floor for months at a time. 12 minutes a day. Sa, ta, na, ma. Sa, ta, na, ma. Sa, ta, na, ma. 2 minutes out loud, 2 minutes whispering, 4 minutes silently to yourself, 2 minutes whispering, 2 minutes out loud, you're done. Unbelievable. Calm the emotional brain, but activated the thoughtful brain. I mean, just like the perfect balancing technique. And it's so simple to do. I just love it. There's a term one of my friends coined called spiritual fitness. And prayer and meditation is part of that. I always think of people in 4 big circles, and people think of physical fitness. So I think there's a biological circle. There's a psychological circle. So that's mind fitness. There's a social circle, right? How we get along with our kids, our spouses, our coworkers. So there's social fitness and spiritual fitness. You want to be a whole, healthy person that's successful, not just in the amount of money you make, but you're more likely to make more money if you're happy. We want to be fit physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually.
Wonderful. So good. So good. In the book, which I always love that you do this, you give us an overview of our amazing brains. And you talk about the different processes they can control and how they can become dysfunctional. And I was actually reading this a lot. I was reading that section to my 9-year-old. He was like hanging out on the couch, and I was having a conversation with him about it, the different parts of the brain while we went along. So it was like a really cool moment. So now he knows a little bit about the amygdala. He knows a little bit about, the cerebellum and of course the prefrontal cortex. And he understands like that's the boss, it's somebody who's there to make some decisions of what not to do, like that has forethought. So I explained that to him, that to be able to map it out, like if I do this thing, if I take this action, this is going to happen. Maybe I might not want to do that thing, and when that part of the brain is not active or undernourished, or we've got a fire breathing dragon creating some kind of, fire somewhere else in the brain, it can mess that part of the process up. So yeah, I just love that you do that and you talk about the brain in the book as well.
I mean, your brain controls everything you do and everything you are. So knowing about it and then learning to love, respect, and nurture it it's absolutely essential to being successful at school or with your money or in your relationships or at work or just how you feel about yourself. It's one of the big missing pieces in the discussion on health and success. I got to scan Tony Robbins, which was really fun for me because, he's the world's self-help guru. And I mean, he's just so smart and so thoughtful. We did a Facebook Live, and I'm like, you teach people really great software programming for success. But what if they have hardware problems? You have to get your brain right and then program it. You can't do that in reverse because you can give someone the best software tools, but if their brain's not healthy, they're just not likely to run the program as you intended. And for a long time, I'm like, I'm giving people this great information and they don't do it, which is why I'm like, I have to look at your brain. Because if your brain's not balanced, it's hard to follow through with the things are helpful for you.
Yeah. I would love to ask you about one more kind of inner dragon, personal dragon, which again, you have, is it 13 that you go through in the book? Right. So this one, because it just coming up for me right now, because I'm just thinking of so many people that I know and that I've seen in my clinical practice, that if we can't really dial in what they're doing with their nutrition or their movement practices or their sleep, so often it would be because they feel they're responsible for so many other things, so many other people. They put themselves last. Can you talk about the responsible dragons?
Oh, this is what causes codependency. In that, you worried about someone when you were young and you wish you could have done more to help, maybe a sick parent or sibling or friend, and you end up feeling responsible for other people. And you may actually end up doing too much for them and causing a dependency and then bitterness. So this is very important to tame, so that you allow people to be responsible for their own lives and you don't take on more than is actually good in the relationship. So this is the dragon that causes people to do too much for others.
Anybody listening? Is anybody listening? Do you have a tendency towards doing too much for others? Just check in with yourself, because I know that some of us, for sure. It's definitely has been a tendency of mine before too.
I gave the quiz so people can learn about their dragons. Go to knowyourdragons.com. And I gave it to the police chief in Newport Beach, and that was his dragon, was the responsible dragon, along with the judgmental dragon, which is actually Tame's main dragon. If I ruled the world, it would be better. But self-care is so important. And if this dragon gets out of control, you create entitled people. That's not a good thing, because entitlement often goes with depression.
Wow. And you talk about that dragon as well in the book too. And, again, I'm just sharing, you were so candid in the book too, which some parts was like, oh, I cannot believe that happened to you. But just to share really quickly, for me and this tendency, I lost my grandmother way too soon, overdose of medication. I lost my grandfather, the love of her life. And this was shortly after he passed away. She just really began to fade away pretty quickly. So of course, just having this internal drive to want to help basically save the world, and having that on my shoulders, it can almost kill you, if you're trying to do something that's completely unreasonable. And I made a shift from being very self-centered because of growing up in a very volatile, kind of violent area. You have to worry about yourself or you're going to die. But from there, I swung the pendulum all the way to the other side to be very other focused. And I just lived and breathed and did everything that I could for my clients, for the patients that were coming in. And I got a little bit out of balance. But you just said the thing that really helped me so much was my own personal self-care and putting myself first so that I could be of better service without depleting myself, and also without creating that, like you said, that codependency. Right? So people helping to inspire that power within them and being much more aware of my need and kind of tendency towards overdoing.
Yeah, it's biblical. Love your neighbor as yourself. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to end up burned out, and that's not going to help anybody. If you do too much, you actually create dependency and bitterness in other people. Now, the upside for the responsible dragon is you are helping tens of thousands of people every week. And I mean, how exciting is that? I love that for you, but it's when you become unbalanced that you burn out, and then you can't do the mission that you're on the planet to do. And so taming this dragon is really important.
Yes. And like I said, you've got very practical things. If any of these dragons are speaking to you, but there's many more. I promise you will see yourself in these pages. And there's practical things that we can do to help to manage these things and tame these dragons. In section 2 of the book, you talk about how other people's dragons can affect you, how other people's dragons are contagious. You even use the word contagious. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, part 2 is the they, them, and other dragons. It's, you're always listening to people alive and dead that are still impacting you. They're the parent dragons. Even though my dad died last year, he's still in my head virtually every day. Or your mom. And I remember I was 6 years old and I told a lie. I have no idea what it was about. And my mom started to cry and she said, I never thought I'd have a son who was going to hell.
When I read that, I was like, oh, that's harsh, Mom. What?
And she was usually not that harsh, but boy, every once in a while. And so when I find I'm harsh with myself, I'm like, oh, you're listening to that parent dragon that, I need to like re-educate. There's teacher dragons and coaches dragons and mean girls and popular kids. And, our brain's always listening to that unless we tame them. And you tame them by basically rewriting your story. And, and I talk in the book about how storytelling is really how we've communicated history and values and goals. And you're always writing your story and you get to choose. I actually talk yesterday, one of my patients is a screenwriter, and I'm like, you get to rewrite your own story. How exciting is that? But you need to know about the dragons that are influencing the current story and then tame them. And you don't want, you have kids, I have kids, I have grandkids. I don't want them growing up with harsh dragons. I want them growing up with influences that encourage them, but you don't want to swing it the other way. The best parents always remember two words: firm. Like when I say something, I mean it, and I'm going to back it up. And kind. That I'm not a dragon, that I'm not breathing fire on your brain. I'm setting appropriate boundaries and doing it with love so you have secure attachments.
Something else that is a little bit later in the book, you talk about outfoxing the scheming dragons, right? These dragons that are external, that are scheming on you, scheming on your attention, scheming on your brain. And one of those being, if this is in that category, digital dragons, right? Digital dragons. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So your brain is always listening to what's going on around you. There's a new, younger, scheming dragon. There's a context scheming dragon. Like those are good for us? No, bad. There's the holiday dragon that we just came out of, where people, it's the holidays, so I should let myself eat anything I want. But one of the worst dragons is the digital dragons, where they've literally, gadgets have hijacked the attention span of a generation of children and now adults. Silicon Valley purposefully makes your gadgets addictive. As Kellogg's sugar cereals went after stomach share, that the Silicon Valley's gone after mind share. And we should be very cautious about it. I remember my grandson, he's 9 months old and he knew how to work an iPhone at 9 months old. But I could tell that our relationship was really around the iPhone whenever I'd see him when he was little. And, his parents did a good job of like going, okay, no technology, because they could just see how addictive it was. And many of my patients actually have developed Tourette's syndrome, a tic disorder based on their exposure to gadgets.
This is nuts. We literally have no idea of the long-term ramifications of this. It's like, it's such a new thing in our evolution as humans. It's pretty concerning, to say the least. Well, you do talk about, and really close the book out with this, and talking about your internal dragon tamer, right? There's a movie series, really great movie series for kids and adults. They make the movies now for families, and like the little mature jokes are in there as well. But it's How to Tame Your Dragon. Shout out to that movie if anybody's seen it. It's really good. But your internal dragon tamer. So first of all, what does that mean? And second of all, can we talk about what hurts our internal dragon tamer?
So the dragon tamer is the front third of your brain. It's your prefrontal cortex. It's the brake, if you will. It stops you from saying things you shouldn't say or doing things you shouldn't do. And there's this dance always between the front part of your brain, the most human, thoughtful part of the brain, and the fear centers, or the amygdala. When the dragons breathe fire on your amygdala, it causes you to react with anxiety, with trauma, with grief, loss, hopelessness, or helplessness. And you need to strengthen the dragon tamer, that part of your brain, because it actually sends inhibitory signals. It sends signals to break or to calm down your emotional brain. And how do you strengthen it? Well, you don't hit soccer balls with your head. It's really important. You don't hurt it physically. This is why I did the big NFL study at a time when the NFL was sort of not telling the truth about traumatic brain injury in football. And uh, my NFL players, I have 300 of them, 4 times the risk of depression as the general population. So it's really important not to hurt your frontal lobes. So protecting against traumatic brain injury, but also eating healthy food, sleeping. You get less than 7 hours at night, you have lower overall function in your frontal lobe, and the dragon tamer sort of goes on vacation. If you have ADD, often sleepy or dragon tamers, the frontal lobe function is less. You go too long between meals, low blood sugar goes with weakness in the prefrontal cortex. And so doing the right lifestyle strategies to strengthen the dragon tamer just helps you feel better overall. You want to protect the front part of your brain.
Perfect. Perfect. Dr. Amen, it's always such a gift to talk with you, and I always walk away feeling smarter. And again, I love the way that you write because it's very to the point, it's very practical, and just incredibly insightful. And it has to be coming from you and your experience. And so I want to make sure that everybody gets a copy of this book as soon as it's available. You can pre-order it right now. And you want to do this because the publication situation right now, you want to make sure that you're on the list to be the first to get your hands on this book. Your brain is always listening. Can you let everybody know you've got some special pre-order bonuses that I told you literally don't tell me about it because I want to be as excited as everybody else. So what are the bonuses and where can I get the book?
So if people pre-order the book, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere great books are sold, they can go to yourbrainisalwayslistening.com and enter their receipt number in. And I have 4 gifts for them. One is a special playbook that my team created on just a summary of the book, so it's actionable, quick. 2 is a program I created called Magnificent Mind with medical hypnosis, actually 6 hypnosis audio downloads I do for you as if you were in my office. I love that because it's really a great dragon taming methodology. And then for people who pre-order the book, I'm going to do a 2-hour live event where I just meet with them and answer their specific questions. And my favorite bonus is a bottle of my favorite supplement from BrainMD, which is the company I created to help people have better brains and better minds. And the supplement is called Happy Saffron. It has saffron, zinc, and curcumin. And saffron has been found in 21 randomized controlled trials to be as effective as antidepressant medication. Saffron has been found to help your mood, to help your memory, to help your eyes, even your focus and weight. So I'm just a huge fan of saffron. It's a $50 value. They'll get a free coupon for a bottle of Happy Saffron. So, and my team's telling me it's like we're going to run out because so many people are pre-ordering the book. But you know, I'm leaning on them. Don't let that happen. But this book will help you so much. It makes a great gift for the people in your life. Here at home, people are talking about, okay, Tana has 10 of the 13 dragons, and how her dragons interact with my dragons, and just it makes for a great way to talk about how you can have a better mind and a better brain.
So good. Are you kidding me? You're giving that away? That is incredible. So what's that? What's the website again after we pre-order?
Yourbrainisalwayslistening.com.
Perfect. So good. Thank you so much, Dr. Amen. I appreciate you immensely. Of course, we want everybody to go and pre-order the book right now. Get this bonus. You get a free bottle. It's going to get shipped to you. You're going to get a coupon for that. Incredible. And the other bonuses as well. Just so cool. You always, again, you over deliver, and I'm just excited to see. You mentioned earlier you're working on another book. I'm excited to see what you have in store for us next. So it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for hanging out with
Thanks,
us.
Shawn. So grateful for our friendship.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to optimize your mindset and to achieve your goals faster.
And really the key to a long-term memory, and I've said this before, information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. Information alone is forgettable, but information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory.